attorney is the people's lawyer who has a responsibility and is charged with the solemn duty to prosecute criminal cases in our state courts. The district attorney is a term that is used in various contexts. Sometimes the district attorney is called the state's attorney. Sometimes they are called the people's lawyer. Sometimes it is a deputy district attorney. But in all of those different descriptive terms, the district attorney is a prosecutor. And as a prosecutor, we have two distinct but very significant responsibilities. First, we are an administrator of justice. Our job is to enforce the state laws and to do justice, to deliver justice in an even-handed, fair, and impartial manner. Secondly, we are law enforcement officials who have a very grave responsibility to the communities that we serve to protect the residents of those communities by the way we administer justice. Prosecutors feel a grave and serious obligation, a solemn responsibility to the crime victims we come in contact with. But we are not, under the law, your lawyer. Instead, we represent the entire citizenry of the community in which we operate, as well as the state in which we serve. That distinction is important because as the prosecutor, at our very core, we must be truth seekers. And from the standpoint of the victims, it's very important for victims to understand that when they communicate with a prosecutor, when they discuss the circumstances of the crime that has been committed against them or their loved one, that they be completely candid. We are burdened and our hands are tied when we walk into a courtroom and we don't know the entire truth. And so we depend upon crime victims to disclose the good, the bad, and the ugly about their case. And as prosecutors, we have a responsibility to crime victims to communicate with you. It's a responsibility that we take very seriously. The system, by definition, by its very nature, by its character, is something we're familiar with because we're the lawyers walking into court. But for crime victims, it is a very foreign, very cold, difficult environment. There are going to be times where you will be uncertain about aspects of the case, about what our role is maybe, about what the facts and evidence are. Sometimes the prosecutor can't tell you everything. The investigation will continue during the course of preparing a case for trial and sometimes even while the case is in trial. And in that regard, we work with other professionals that help us in the office. Most district attorneys' offices throughout the nation today, in addition to working with those frontline detectives that are employed by the police agencies, most district attorneys' offices also have other peace officer professionals who are experienced detectives that serve in those offices as district attorney investigators, or they may be called district attorney inspectors in some jurisdictions. They tend to be the most experienced detectives who come to those agencies after they've had experience in a frontline police department. Their role is to help the district attorney prepare the case. And as a victim, you will have a great deal of contact with them. Every time an issue comes up during the pendency of a case, the defense may allege something about you, something terrible about your family. They may allege something about the victim and terrible about the victim. You will be contacted by those investigators and ask questions. Each time the investigator contacts you, he or she has an obligation to record that communication, to record that conversation. And then the district attorney, when he or she gets the report, has an obligation to discover it, turn it over to the defense. Because our system operates in such a way that it really protects the defendant's rights to know everything that is occurring throughout that entire process. And there isn't a prosecutor in the nation handling a homicide case that in his heart of hearts wouldn't want to bring back your loved one if they could, wouldn't want to make you whole if he could, wouldn't want to take away your pain if he could. But we can't. That's not what we're trained to do, and frankly, it would be impossible to do that. But what we can do, what we are committed to doing, what we will fight every day to do, is to bring the person, the terrible criminal who hurt you, who hurt your family, to bring that person to justice, to hold them accountable. We view that as the most important thing we can do for a crime victim. And I want you to know, we need you. We need your help to do that. You need us, we need you. And together we can make a difference for you and your family.
One of the big question marks when you kind of get thrown into the justice system is exactly what to expect. We all look at TV programs, we read books, the whole 9 yards, and the scenarios that we see that we are used to identifying with are usually very, very far from the real world. They touch only the fringes of reality. So when you're thinking that you know what to expect, for example, it just does not happen.
The best way to deal with that, with the prosecutor, their investigators, or their staff people, is to just bring it out on the table and say, I know that you can't tell me everything when I want to know it, but let me know if there's something you can't tell me, and that's fine.
Just keep asking questions. You're going to get a lot of business cards from a lot of people. They're going to offer you services. Use them. Initially, you feel like, well, I don't know if I should ask that question, or I don't even know what to ask. Say that. I don't know what to ask. I don't know what to expect. What's going to happen? And then they're going to tell you, and tomorrow you're going to feel like your question was not answered. Ask it again. And you feel like you're asking the question over and over and over because we're not a police officer. We're not a district attorney. We're a victim of crime. We don't know and we can't comprehend. So it may take a few times for us to listen to the same thing until we realize what the true question is. And until then is when you're going to be educated or at least feel comfortable as to what the process is going to be. Every
agency I've ever worked with has been in an overworked, terribly overworked situation. They all are. The detectives are handling too many murder cases. The district attorneys have a number of cases, and all of which seem to come down at the same time, so that it's always a terrible time crunch for everyone involved, which is why the communication is so important. Because if you don't have any kind of agreement going in as to when they will call you or when you should call them, and on what basis, whether it be obviously they're going to want to hear any time new information comes up, and immediately. Hopefully this video that you're watching now will go a long ways toward introducing you to what you can expect in the criminal justice system. When our son was 27 years old, he just disappeared. It was 11 months before we found out that he had been kidnapped and assaulted, strangled, and thrown out of an airplane over the Pacific Ocean. His body was never found. And although my wife and I had both been involved in our communities and local government and thought we knew what the law was all about, we found out very quickly that we knew nothing about how the criminal justice system works.
Took us 8 years to get through trial. Very difficult, but before we got through the murder trial of our son, my brother, Mickey Thompson, and his wife were also murdered.
What happened next, I don't remember. So there was a lot of witnesses that came forward, but what they said was that I ran out of my car and I was screaming, saying, my husband is going to kill me, somebody help me. and he just casually walked out of his car, just chased me down and shot one bullet, entered and exited my head. And from what they said is I was just drenched in blood. Paramedics came. They were about 2 minutes away from me, so they were on their way there. But that was the beginning of the story, like I said, because obviously from there, what happened, he left. He was immediately arrested a few hours later. He then posted bail. We went into hiding. I was only in the hospital for about a week, and it's a miracle that I'm alive. My poor family, my dad, my mom, I was in a coma for 2 days.
As a parent, as a mother, a parent of a murdered child, when my murder first happened, I was under the illusion that the criminal justice system worked. And I lost confidence because it took so long. I lost confidence, but I never lost hope.
I'm a police officer and a victim. I was sexually assaulted when I was in the 6th grade all the way up through my freshman year. I suppressed the memories of what took place for numerous years.
My daughter Denise, who was coming home from a concert, disappeared. We found her automobile parked beside the road with a flat tire, then 24 hours later. And for 3 years, that is all we knew. We looked for her. There was just no clues. But the thing is, I think we didn't give up. We kept looking, and finally in 1994, the perpetrator was found, and he had Denise in a freezer in Arizona.
My brother was 40 years old, married, master's degree, 2 young kids, a 9-year-old daughter and a 15-year-old son. And on this Sunday morning, he went out and was sitting there in his car, and 2 what we now know to be gang members who didn't know him from anybody wanted his car and walked up to him at point-blank range and shot him and threw him out of the car to die like a piece of meat. And in the aftermath of that, we were thrust into the criminal justice system like so many people that get that phone call or a knock on the door that fundamentally alters your life. And the system wasn't always as swift, severe, and certain as maybe we learned in our civics class. And we learned in court testimony that these guys flipped a coin before they walked up to my brother to see who was going to pull the trigger. And my brother was a gentle, unpretentious soul who probably would have given him the vehicle. But immediately, and I